there was very few producing organizations for theater for young audiences in the city.
Okay.
And even fewer that were in the sort of style of some of the work in the UK and Australia, that was experimental, that really treated young people like with a lot of agency. A lot of the work for children in the States are, huge intellectual property pieces that have, the big bobbleheads and the
Disney.
big fur costumes,
Disney.
the Disney, the Sesame, all of those, Nickelodeon, that sort of stuff, PBS, arena style shows. And we wanted to be making work that was small batch, that really engaged the whole child, and had them lean into curiosity and all these things, and engage with original stories. And so that was the seed behind it, was this idea of a bold original production for young people, where we would be blurring the lines between where the show ends and life begins. So we really try and put a lot of like pre-show content around our pieces. And we try to make the edges of the theatrical experience a little blurry, so that it's, really engaging imagination on a lot of fronts. And this idea of working locally, I very much feel close to that. We try to create our shows with young people in the process. So we will often be doing rehearsals in a rehearsal space, but then we'll do workshops in partnership with a school where we test out some of that content and see what the young people are responding to, and sometimes go in asking a question that then informs the next step of the rehearsal process. So a very clear example of that was, we were working at a settlement house on the Lower East Side that had a preschool attached to it. And we wanted to make a show for early years about shadows. And we had gone into the classroom and played with a couple of ideas around shadows. And we went in with a question of, what happens to your shadow when you go to sleep? And the class came up with the suggestion of, well, it goes to the moon. And then we said, well, what happens when the shadow gets to the moon? And they were like, it has a dance party. And so that is actually basically the narrative of the show came from that group. And then what we do for, a pre-show workshop on that front, or pre-show engagement on that front, when audiences arrive to the theater, they encounter a shadow playground. And so there are like projectors set up, and they can put their shadow in there, and it's asking questions on a slideshow as that's happening. And they're invited to create out of a paper towel tube with some foam stickers, a telescope, so that we can seed the idea of going to the moon. And throughout the show, as the character uses their own telescope at certain moments of the show, you see all the kids pull up their telescope and they use it in that moment of the show. A different example would be this show Up and Away for young audiences on the autism spectrum, where the invitation to the show comes from a character in the play. And so it's Mr. Fogg is inviting you on the 1000th balloon ride of the Fogg Family Balloon Society. And so there's a pre-show video that's sort of in that world of invitation. And for some of our workshops, we had a postcard that was left in the classroom that said, Mr. Fogg is inviting you to the 1000th balloon ride on this date and time. And then they'd come with that postcard and turn it in. Yeah, so some of these tactile exchanges, absolutely, we want to break through that picture frame that has existed around the story, and lean into developmentally where young people are. So if you go back to the original Peter Pans and those sorts of early childhood pieces, that were all about interaction between Punch and Judy's and those types of puppetry pieces that, you know, that's all about the audience interaction and the and leaning into that a you know, a 2 to 5 year old does not want to come and sit and be quiet. They want to come and engage with the character. So let's build in moments for that to happen. And for older ones, let's, you know, kind of lean on the edge of like scary safe, we call it, where it's still, you know, we're creating a world. It's not a haunted house. We're not going to jump out at you, but it is a little bit of a mystery, and you're interacting with a character who's maybe up to something. And how do we bring you into that world that you're not going to be just a passive audience member? You're going to be an engaged audience member, because
so what happens?
Our whole name comes from, you know, we're their trusty sidekick. They're the hero of the story. So oftentimes our shows need that audience member to complete something. We are creating that space in that world to play within. And we use this phrase of zoom in, zoom out structure, where the play has anchors where we're going to do this full group scene, and then there's going to be one-on-one time with the puppet, your audience member, and the cast member. And the cast member is improvising. We do pre-audience surveys where we will learn what the potential triggers are for a young person. Like this, you know, this child does not like the sound of rustling tinfoil. Well, if we happen to have that in the show, we would be sure to not do that with that child. As well as the interests of that child. They love trains. Cool. Well, our improvisation moments are going to be all around trains. And so they build that part of the narrative together.
So the children are storytellers. The children are storytellers too.
Yes, depending on our piece, that I think is a great goal. Whether they are joining us in the audience and they're, you know, having that moment with us, or when we're doing the workshops and they are helping to craft literally some of the beats of the story.
Right.
We want to be leaning into that, because that's what makes it resonate within child logic for our TYA, our Theater for Young Audiences side of it, is that it feels authentic to kids because other kids have contributed to how the story is being told. Adult logic doesn't often translate.